Okay. All right. Week 14 is over. Did you make the playoffs? Did you make the
Did I?
playoffs, guys? No, not you. I know what
Yeah,
happened to you.
I did not.
I'm asking the people. I'm asking the people if they made the playoffs or not. This is a big week. A lot of people are tilting this morning. A lot of people upset. Especially after last night's game. That game was weird. Not the
Just
game that a lot of people wanted. It was just injury after injury after injury.
yeah.
There's like literally one player that did well. That's it. James Conner. That was it. Everybody else shit the bed or got hurt. So yeah, it's a rough morning for a lot of people. But for some, they squeaked into the playoffs. Like
Yeah,
myself,
I'll
even
say.
though even though I caught the L yesterday, I still squeaked in because I had just a handful of points more than Zach. And
Yes.
that's the only reason why I squeaked into that 6th seed, even though, I didn't get it in the most gracious way.
You got your ticket, so that's what counts. I don't think I could have done anything differently. So this was just a bad twist of fate. That's how it goes sometimes. I'm not butthurt about it. In our followers league, I'm 10-4. So
You are. And I missed
yeah,
the
so
playoffs in that one.
yeah. So I'm gonna hang my hat on that one there. I mean that team wasn't that good. I think I just got some good matchups in that league, but
No, I hear you. I'm pretty sure I missed the playoffs in that one. Let me see. Did I? No. Wait, did I make the playoffs?
yeah,
Hold on a
you
second.
did at 6-8.
Oh, I didn't, dude. I lost yesterday so badly. I didn't realize I made the playoffs. Wow, I'm so lucky, dude. I'm the luckiest guy. I squeaked in on that one too. Oh man, I'm so lucky. It's over.
We'll
It's
see if it
over.
carries. We'll see if it carries over through the playoffs.
I don't think so. In that league, you have a pretty good team. You have a pretty good team in that one.
It's all
So
right.
listen, I hope, if you listen to this podcast, I hope that you made the playoffs. I know that everybody can, but we're hoping that you guys can stick around for the rest of the year. Even if you didn't make the playoffs, kind of just keep paying attention to what's going on. But yeah, I mean, this is the waiver wire show. And if you listen to the waiver wire show, hopefully you need a waiver wire pickup so you can make it to the next round going into next week's. Now, if you got a first round bye, that's awesome. Good for you. I'm
Yep.
jealous. But yeah, all you got to focus on is week 15. Don't worry about the matchups in week 4. I'm sorry, week 16. You don't have to worry
Yeah.
about the matchups in week 15. You kind of go from there. So yeah, man. Listen, like if you didn't make the playoffs, guys, I get it. It's not the end of the world. Keep watching football, keep paying attention. But it is what it is. Sometimes it happens. It's a game. It's why we play. Okay. I feel like I got to get that out the way before we
Yeah.
before we go. But the
Somebody
game
has
last
to
night,
lose.
dude. I know somebody has to lose. What a weird game, dude. Like not the type
Yeah.
of game you'd hope for. Like if
No.
you needed some points, right, to win your championship. If you needed a quiet game from these guys to get you in, then you probably got it, unless you were going up against James Conner.
Yeah.
And by the way, James Conner was on the field for 71 of 75 offensive snaps last night. And the amount of love that I was giving James Conner before this season, like it looked completely unwarranted. But
Yeah.
maybe that will end up actually helping people win their league, or at least help them make the playoffs last night. So, maybe that's what I'm going to hang my head on as well, right? So
Yeah.
that would all be worth it. Like if James Conner comes in and ends up being a league winner for people, like it's going to be like, all right, I don't feel as bad,
This is
for
what we were
recommending James
talking
Conner the way I
about.
did.
Yeah, at the beginning of the
Right.
season. Yeah, no, he was a
This
little
was the
banged up
plan.
earlier this season too. So
Yeah, oh, for sure. He was banged up and like I don't know, the offense wasn't as good as we thought it was going to be. He wasn't involved in the passing game as much. A little bit of a, not a split backfield, but he wasn't getting like 95% of the snaps like he's getting now, which is going to
yeah,
help him. Hopefully he can stay healthy. And, if he does, he's going to be very, very solid for you. High in RB2 the rest of the way. But the big story of the night, man, Kyler Murray tearing his ACL, brutal injury. Hopefully he can make a
yeah,
recovery soon. You have to think that this injury will impact his value in 2023. But hey, like at least he got paid this offseason, right? Like glad that
yeah,
happened for him. But the rest of this season, DeAndre Hopkins, Hollywood Brown, Rondale Moore when he's back, this offense takes a hit, man. These guys
A
can be
big hit.
fine, but like Hopkins is probably just a wide receiver 2, at best.
Mhm.
And Hollywood is probably like a high-end wide receiver 3, maybe. Colt McCoy was lost yesterday, and Cliff Kingsbury didn't do anything to help him out. I don't think it's almost like Colt McCoy didn't prepare like at all. But the problem was that the Patriots, what happens is like you get into a negative game script. The Patriots know that you have to pass the ball, and they're just going to pass rush on every single play. And that's why we like targeting fantasy defenses who have who are favored by a ton, because at the end of the game you get like 3-4 sacks. That could lead to turnovers.
Yeah, Josh Uche had that himself. I think last night it was 3 sacks for him. So I'm not surprised.
Like in the last 4 minutes.
Yeah. So Colt McCoy, yeah. You say he looked unprepared. Yeah, it's kind of what I expect. He's a backup quarterback, and I'm not really a big Colt McCoy guy in the first place. He's a backup quarterback. That's what he's going to do. So yeah, everybody on this offense takes a hit, except maybe, like you said, James Conner. I think James Conner can retain, his value at least somewhat, because the ground game looks like it's going to be what's working for them. And James Conner, like you said, he got that rollback that we wanted him to have coming into the season. He has that again. So hopefully he can keep stranglehold on that and things don't get too out of hand for him. But as far as receivers, definitely DeAndre Hopkins. He had 11 targets. He caught 7 of them, but just for 79 yards. So he wasn't doing his thing. He had that fumble too, which was bad. I don't think that's going to affect him moving forward. It's not like they're going to give him less snaps. But this offense isn't going to be very good the rest of the way. They're definitely, if they're not mathematically already eliminated, I'm not sure. They're not making the playoffs. So there's really going to be no reason for them, be trying too hard. I mean, unless it's just, for something to hang your hat on this season. But this has been a lost
it's simply Cliff Kingsbury's job. It's Cliff Kingsbury's job at this point. That's it. And he's probably going to get fired after this year.
If you're the Cardinals players, maybe you recognize that. Maybe you just keep losing. You know what I'm saying? Let's get him out of there. Just someone competent. And yeah, as far as Kyler Murray goes with that injury, that's definitely going to impact his stock. We're going to be talking about the injury, once June rolls around and, off-season training activities are starting and all that stuff. Kyler Murray, I'm not sure if he's even going to be ready for week 1, because injuries, they tend to be like 9, 10, 11-month injuries, almost a year, right? So if you add 9 months to now, I mean, that takes us right up to kickoff next season. And that's just a maybe. That's best case scenario.
Yeah, for a quarterback, he might be able to get back, but you have to understand that rushing upside is going to take a hit for sure.
Yeah.
At the very least.
That's no question.
Now, next week they have Denver. Okay. So it's a little bit of a tough matchup for these wide receivers. And it's a really tough matchup, actually. Now, the good thing is that one thing to remember is that Hopkins went up against San Francisco in week 11 with Colt McCoy and went 9 for 91 on 12 targets. So it wasn't terrible. Hollywood wasn't there, though, right? So targets are going to be distributed a little bit. So, at least Colt McCoy has shown that he can get the ball to his guys if he has to, even in a tough matchup. So I wouldn't go completely off of DeAndre Hopkins next week.
No.
Coming up.
Like you said,
so
he's a wide receiver too.
Just not a whole lot of upside.
There. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's pretty much it. Like, what else happened? Oh, of course, Ramondre Stevenson, obviously, people were expecting a big game. It was a good matchup. He left the game with an ankle injury. He came back. He had like a bunch of targets thrown his way for like the 3 snaps that he was in there for, and then he had to leave again. He couldn't hold up on that ankle. So after the game, he was asked whether he would play next week, and he said he hopes so. So there's no guarantee. So, which is no surprise why Damien Harris would be at the top of our waiver wire list this week. So, and once we get into that, we'll talk more about that. But it's unfortunate. Ramondre Stevenson, he was in line to win a lot of people their weeks and, push them into the playoffs, but didn't work out. And it does suck. And hopefully, if you did make the playoffs and you have Ramondre, the hope is that he does end up making his way back next week. But he's not the guy that you want to get hurt right now, because he's been literally carrying teams for this entire season. Yeah, pretty much.
And he was doing really good. It is really disappointing because, we said the work that he got in the few snaps that he had was, right on pace with what he was getting the rest of the season and when he's been producing so well. So I feel like when he comes back, I feel like it's going to be in season. I don't think it was that bad. He tried to come back and play on it. Maybe he plays next week. I'm not sure. We're gonna have to see. But even if he does miss time, whenever he comes back, I'm not worried about him not reclaiming that role. I mean, I don't think there's anything Damien Harris is going to do.
No.
I mean, unless he goes for like 200 yards in each of these next few games, I think Ramondre Stevenson's going to have the same role they had. So there's no worries for me. It's just you're not going to have him for the most important games of the year. He's got
even if he does get like 400 yards in the next 2 games without Ramondre, I feel like Ramondre would go right back into his role because that's just how much Bill Belichick likes him, loves him actually, because he never played a workhorse like he does with Ramondre. So unfortunate there. Obviously, Damien Harris would be the pickup, and then, honestly, between, I like Pierre Strong, man. We talked about Pierre Strong this offseason. He played in the FCS. He was a very efficient runner, especially his freshman year. And he's a guy who didn't play against great competition, and once he got a full workload in college last year as a junior, his efficiency definitely went down. But he's exciting to watch, man. And we saw him yesterday. We saw his speed, come into play yesterday, and he also got the goal line carry too. So, if Damien Harris can't go, he didn't practice all week last week, so it's possible that Damien Harris is out again also. So we might have to depend on these other guys. I think it'll be more of a split, if neither of those guys go. But if I were to pick one of those guys in the Patriots backfield who's left, it would probably be Pierre Strong.
Yeah, that's really who you have to go with. I mean,
I would say so.
Pierre Strong, he looked better last night. And obviously, Kevin Harris was all right. But Pierre Strong, he had that 44-yard run, and then he obviously had the touchdown to go with it and 2 catches. Kevin Harris didn't get any targets. So it looks like that role, if there's any pass catching, might go to him. It could change. We haven't seen either of these guys, pretty much all year, a whole lot. So it'll be interesting to see how they're used. But yeah, just early, I agree with you. I would go with Pierre Strong if I had to pick up one of the 2. Kevin Harris, do you think you could get away with picking him up?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he did run more routes than Pierre Strong, but it looks like it was more of a hot hand approach where Pierre Strong looked good to start the second half, and then he stayed in. When the injury initially happened, it was Kevin Harrison there, right, in the first half, and then in the second half, it was more Pierre Strong. And I think it was more of a hot hand situation where it's like, whoever comes in and does their thing, he's going to get the snaps, and that's what happened. Pierre Strong ended up doing his thing. So I think that's going to continue on to next week if Damien Harris can't go. And remember, Damien Harris, he has a quad injury, so maybe he won't be at 100%, and they don't want to give him a full workload.
Yeah, that's
possible. True. So yeah, hopefully you were able to overcome all that from last night.
It was a mess.
It was a mess, man. Deebo Samuel, he has an MCL sprain and an ankle sprain. So it's not a high ankle sprain. It's not an ACL. So good news, but he has 2 injuries right now that he has to overcome. Yeah. So there's a chance. They're saying that there's a chance he comes back for week 17, which would be our fantasy championship week. But I wouldn't hold out hope. It's possible that they hold him out. Like if the 49ers, if they're good for the playoffs, if there's not a whole lot of seeding that could change, they might just hold him out. And wait. But remember, the NFL season goes up until week 18. So just keep that in mind, right? Like week 17 is still, a pretty important week for most NFL teams. Unless you're the Eagles, who have only 1 loss, right? So just keep that in mind. I wouldn't drop him, but I would, I wouldn't depend on him, for my championship week.
No, especially with the injury, the way that he was producing too, even when he was healthy, it wasn't fantastic. You could start other guys over him and be all right. So if he's going to be coming back and he might not be 100%, like you said, dealing with 2 injuries, that would be grounds for me to kind of leave him on my bench unless I absolutely needed to start him. Like I'm sure there are other options that people have on their championship rosters, especially with the bye weeks done and over with, that they could get away with starting somebody over him. So I'm pretty much proceeding, if I'm a team in the playoffs, which I'm not, but I'm pretty much proceeding with Deebo Samuel as if he's not really going to be playing the rest of the season.
Well, with the whole injury situation and the quarterback situation too, with Brock Purdy, I feel like, Deebo's role, was set to increase, and we kind of saw that, to start the game last week. So if I had Deebo, I was excited for the rest of the year. Like his upside just increased, his floor just increased. And I was looking forward to that. I would have been looking forward to it. I didn't have Deebo on many teams, but it's a situation where, I wish, that didn't happen because he would have been a solid, I think, wide receiver 2, low end wide receiver 2, rest of the year. But, unfortunately, now you're going to have to find another option. And maybe Brandon Ayuk can kind of step up, and him and Brock Purdy maybe can get a little bit of a rapport going for the rest of the year.
Yeah, Brandon Ayuk didn't look bad with Brock Purdy. I mean, he didn't have the target share like he had with Jimmy Garoppolo, but he didn't look bad. He had that one long catch, I know, for the touchdown. So we'll see how it goes. There's something to work with there.
I think so. DJ Dallas practiced on a limited basis on Monday. Kenneth Walker as well. They didn't actually practice. It was just an estimated practice report. They're playing on Thursday night. If Kenneth Walker suits up, it's a tough decision that you have to make because he's going up against the 49ers and he's banged up. So it's like, what do you do? Right. It's a tough situation. I'm not going to rank him as like a top 15 guy this week, unless he gets a full practice in today. Then maybe, but he'll probably be ranked somewhere between 16 and 20, if that.
Yeah. We've seen the 49ers defense to shut teams down. The Seahawks offense is good, but it's really been the passing game that's been getting it done for them. And, Kenneth Walker, he was good, but he kind of came down to earth a little bit the past few weeks before he got injured.
He's just a touchdown machine, pretty much. Yeah, that's about it.
That's what it is. Yeah, so he scores a lot of touchdowns. But against the 49ers, like you said, and then he's coming up. He's a little bit banged up. If he does play, there's no guarantee that he does play. I mean, I might have him ranked like 20, maybe a low-end RB2 for the week. I think that's about right. You could maybe make an argument that he should be a little bit higher, maybe if he comes back and, like you said, if he does have that full practice and he plays. But I think that you have to, kind of take into account the matchup here. The defense has just been stifling for the 49ers, so I'm not sure how much success you can expect this team to have against them, especially on a short week.
A couple of more injury updates. Jeff Wilson, he's day-to-day with his hip injury, so it doesn't seem like a serious hip injury. He might end up playing this upcoming week. Monitor that because Raheem Mostert would be a great start if Jeff Wilson can't go. Right. DJ Moore, he has a knee sprain and he's day-to-day. Apparently it's nothing significant, so it's possible that he's back and can play this past week. Unfortunately, he didn't have a good week even before he went out this past week. T. Higgins, he's day-to-day. Tyler Boyd is also day-to-day. Lovie Smith says he's unsure about Dameon Pierce's status going into next week. Mike White, he's day-to-day with a rib injury as well. So many damn injuries, Jesus Christ.
Right.
And that's it. But I think with Tyler Boyd, apparently, it's possible that he misses a week or two, according to Tom Pelissero. So just keep that in mind, if you're deciding, between like some of these low-end flex options in a deep league.
Right. And Mike, our producer, he just put in, he's telling us that there are sources saying that Dameon Pierce has a high ankle sprain. They're calling it that, and they could miss a week or two. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure. We're not sure what Lovie Smith said, but if he does miss time, obviously you're not going to be starting him, but it doesn't look like you should expect that in your lineup, at least next week. If it is the case, a high ankle sprain, something like that.
Okay. All right. Perfect. I think that's it for the most part when it comes to news. So let's get into the waiver wire rankings now. Damien Harris is at number 1 here. Listen, it's possible that Damien Harris doesn't play this week, right? Like you pick him up. I wouldn't be spending a whole lot of fab unless I'm super desperate for a running back. It's possible that you can get away with getting Chuba Hubbard for cheaper. If you really need a running back, and I wouldn't be surprised if Chuba Hubbard, even outscores Damien Harris because Chuba Hubbard is a little bit involved in the pass game. Damien Harris probably won't be. And I don't even know if Damien Harris is going to play in every down role. And if he does play. Now, it's a good matchup against Vegas for Damien Harris this week. So I think he would be like I wouldn't even call him a low-end RB2. Maybe I guess it would be a low-end RB2, high-end RB3 play for me this week if Ramondre doesn't go.
I think a high-end RB3 feels about right for me because I'm not sure Damien Harris, how much of a workload he's going to end up having. If it comes down to the passing game or whatever, I think that he's been more of the running back, in this offense. Obviously, when Ramondre Stevenson plays, he gets the targets and he gets the catches. And Damien Harris, he's pretty much the ground game guy. So we could see maybe Pierre Strong or maybe even Kevin Harris, step into the receiving role, handle that by committee. Each of them get a few targets, and then Damien Harris just take the brunt of the early down, run game work. So I'd temper expectations. I'm not sure how much of an upside he would have. I think his production is going to come from just rushing yardage and touchdowns. I don't see him getting too many targets because that's not how he's been used historically in this offense. So I would temper expectations, but definitely, this is a guy that's capable of starting in your lineup if he does go on Sunday, especially if you're missing Ramondre Stevenson and you can pick him up. He has to be floating around on waiver wires, right? Because he's been out for a little while and he wasn't.
Yeah, he's about 50% rostered, like right around the edge of where we look at these waiver wire options for. But he should be available in a lot of leagues for sure.
Right.
And then we have Elijah Moore at number 2. We talked about him yesterday that he ran at a near full route participation on Sunday, and he ran at a near full route participation in week 13 as well. So he's already ramping up. The other thing is this: Elijah Moore, he's playing out of the slot a lot more, since he kind of came back into that full-time role. And this week, they're going up against the Lions. And the Lions have been very vulnerable to slot wide receivers. So if you need an upside play, I think you can plug in Elijah Moore this week.
I think he's a really nice flex play. I think you could maybe get away with starting him at wide receiver 3. I think he is a high end wide receiver 3 with wide receiver 2 upside this week. And he has a chance to score a touchdown, it seems like, with Mike White at quarterback, assuming he's good to go. So, yeah, if he's sitting on your waiver wire, I would be surprised if he was sitting on the waiver wire, because last week he did have that full route participation, and the week before that he scored that touchdown. So things seem to be getting better surrounding his name on the Jets offense. It seems like he's getting more integrated. And I think if you can pick him up, you'd have yourself a strong wide receiver. And that's why we have him here at 2.
He's available in a lot of leagues. He's available in 69% of leagues, so 31% rostered. He's one of the lowest rostered players on this entire list. So if he's available in your league, he should definitely be picked up at the very least, because he has a good schedule the rest of the way, and he is a high upside player, as we saw last year. And then, Chuba Hubbard, I have him here at 3. If you need a running back for sure, and you don't want to take any chances with Damien Harris and whether, he's going to play this week or not, Ramondre Stevenson might even end up playing, right? So like he might come back and now Damien Harris, you can't even play him, right? Chuba Hubbard, I think, would be the most, the pickup that will just give you points, right? He had 17 carries in week 12 before the bye, 14 carries this past week against Seattle, 3 targets as well. So 17 touches in this game, 99 yards. So, he scored a touchdown, so he's being used interchangeably with Deontay Foreman as a very close 1B in this backfield. And they're trusting him more and more as he's gotten healthier. So Chuba Hubbard is somebody that you could pick up right now and you can plug in as a flex easily.
Yeah, Chuba Hubbard was getting it done, if you remember, back in the day when Christian McCaffrey was a Panther and he would be down with injuries. Chuba Hubbard was actually, pretty serviceable. He was able to do what he needed to do at the running back position. And we're seeing that he's, like you said, getting healthier. He looks better in this offense, and they're definitely trusting him to take some work along with Deontay Foreman. This isn't the Foreman show. Obviously, he had a few good games, but Chuba Hubbard never really got rotated out. He had a couple quiet games, but the workload has been there for him for the most part, especially as of late. And that's the kind of stuff you want to take advantage of, especially heading into the playoffs. If you don't have a running back, one of them just got injured, which this past week was pretty brutal for injuries, you should definitely be picking him up because, like you said, he gives you a nice floor. Damien Harris might have a higher upside week to week. I don't think Chuba Hubbard puts up 18 points again, PPR. I don't think he has that type of day again, but I think he's good for 10 or 12, especially if the Panthers offense plays like it has these past few weeks.
Yeah, just keep in mind, they are at home against Pittsburgh, which means that the game script should favor these running backs in Carolina. Right. Pittsburgh's offense is not a type of offense that's going to score a lot of points. So it's possible that these running backs combine again for like 35 carries. I can totally see it. It happened in the last 2 games.
And it's not just a game script. I mean, this is Mitch Trubisky we're talking about potentially starting for the Steelers, and we saw him throw a bunch of picks last week, and the Panthers got a bunch of picks on Geno Smith just last week. So this could be a matchup where, like you said, we see them on the field a lot more than we don't. And when you're on the field and when you're on your field more than you anticipate being on the field, that'll allow you to dictate the game flow. And that's what benefits a running back. So I think that's definitely, a good point there that they have the Steelers coming up.
A few guys that I want to mention that, are not on this list who can be available in your leagues. Like they don't, I'm looking at guys who are available in 50%, at least 50% of leagues on Yahoo, ESPN, and Sleeper. Guys who are not available in most leagues but are kind of near that threshold. Number one, Zonovan Knight. He's around 58% rostered on Sleeper. If he's available on your waiver wire, he's obviously the number one pick by far. Like, it's not even close. So if he's available, you just throw everything at him. All the rest of your fab, if you have any left, Zonovan Knight is the number one ad. Treylon Burks, he's also right near that threshold, but he's a little bit above it. If he's available, he has to be picked up. He should be back this week from that concussion. Evan Ingram, obviously he had that huge game last week. He's also over the threshold by a little bit, so you want to pick him up. Donovan Peoples-Jones, another guy who's available in about 35 to 40% of leagues. If he's available, he had the best game of his career this past week. You want to pick him up. Zay Jones, also, he's over the threshold as well. All of these guys, I'd rather pick these guys up than any of the guys I just mentioned. Maybe outside of Elijah Moore is close with like DPJ. I think DPJ is a lot more, reliable. But I'd rather pick all these guys over the guys that I already mentioned. Zay Jones, he's also over the threshold, and that's about it. Richie James, somebody that I was going to put on this list. Just in general, but not near the top of the list, but maybe somewhere in the middle or the bottom. He's in concussion protocol right now. I'm assuming he's going to miss this week. So that's why he's not on the waiver wire list at all. But he had 3 out of the past 4 weeks. He's had decent games.
3 touchdowns.
Including against Washington. So, he should be okay once he's back for the Giants. Okay, I just wanted to mention those names, beforehand, just in case they're available on your waiver wire. And you can't, because I don't want you going ahead and picking up Damien Harris before you pick up Zonovan Knight. That's why I mentioned it.
That's an important, difference.
Yes.
Difference to make.
Exactly, for sure. Okay, and then I have DJ Chark at number 4. The only thing with DJ Chark you got to keep in mind is that they're going up against the Jets this week, so I'm simply not playing DJ Chark. Like that's it's pretty simple for me. The Jets on the outside, DJ Chark runs almost all of his routes on the outside, against DJ Reed, against Sauce Gardner. I'm good. Okay. If anybody's going to have a good game, it's probably going to be Amon-Ra out of the slot, but I don't want to play DJ Chark. But the reason why I want to pick DJ Chark up is for the weeks after that. I'll pick him up. I'll throw him on my bench if he's available, because he has Carolina and Chicago in weeks 16 and week 17. And he could be a solid, potentially solid wide receiver 3 for you in those matchups.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I was kind of going into this matchup last week. I was looking at DJ Chark, what he did before, obviously, they played, and the Bills played the Jets. The Jets corners just shut down Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis and Josh Allen. Like, they're going to have their way with the Lions receivers too. So I think this is absolutely, the right call. I wouldn't maybe start him next week, but the weeks afterwards, definitely, because Jared Goff is playing pretty well. Hopefully a matchup against New York doesn't kill whatever momentum they have in terms of, offensive output. But DJ Chark, he's a good pickup. You're not going to be able to start him this week, but he's been getting it done recently. You should be able to have him on your bench at least. He's going to be a nice add. I mean, regardless of who you have on your bench at wide receiver.
Agreed. LC Wong is asking, is McKinnon worth picking up over all of these waiver wire players? That's another one that was kind of near the threshold as well that I didn't mention. I would say that I would rather pick up Damien Harris, Elijah Moore. See, the thing is with McKinnon, at least you can play him, the rest of the year, right? Damien Harris might be a 1-week rental. So sure, maybe I'll pick him up over McKinnon. I think depending on what you need, I think Elijah Moore is going to be potentially a little bit more valuable, maybe a higher floor. Chuba Hubbard, same thing. I'd rather have Chuba Hubbard over McKinnon. I'd rather have Chark over McKinnon. And maybe that's it. Like, if you're looking for upside, but McKinnon's role last week didn't change. He just happened to have these long passes went his way. The Denver defense is, one that doesn't let wide receivers do their thing. So that's part of the reason why there was so many dump offs to Jerick McKinnon this past week. I think we don't see that type of game from McKinnon moving forward.
Yeah, just for a little context too, he's gone over 6 targets in 4 games this season, including the one against Denver that we just saw. The one game he had 6 targets, he finished with 5 points. 2 other games he finished with 8 targets apiece, 10 and 11 points. So this was an outlier performance. by a mile. So, like we said, his role hasn't changed. And those were good days by his standards. The other days that he's had were relatively quiet as well. So I'm not sure how much I prioritize McKinnon over really a whole lot of these guys because, like you said, the role didn't change. It was just the production. And how many times, I mean, we know it's Patrick Mahomes, but how many times are we going to see him like reverse flip the thing from, or like twist his body, just flick it out there for Jerick McKinnon? He's going to have 50 yards ahead of him of open space. We're not going to see that every week. It was a great play, but Jerick McKinnon, his value, I think, is just about the same. You lucked out if you started him this week.
CW78 is asking, you guys think it's time to drop Singletary for a player like Knight or McKinnon? I would drop him for Zonovan Knight very easily, but I would not drop him for McKinnon.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. That one's pretty simple. Just because
cool.
Devin Singletary has a decent, workload, a decent role in the offense, where Jerick McKinnon, he's just a pass catcher, and that's about it.
Who would you trust more the rest of the year, Elijah Moore or DJ Chark? That's a good question.
That is a good question.
Trust. Remember, this is a trust issue question. Right?
Yeah, trust.
I don't know how much trust you can have in Elijah Moore.
Yeah.
He's more of an upside play. I think this week I'd rather play Elijah Moore, but I think the weeks after that I might rather have DJ Chark. Yeah. So that's how I would play it. If you really need to play this week, I would go. This is Sean, by the way, asking this question. Mm-hmm. Elijah Moore for this week and DJ Chark for weeks 16 and 17. That's how I would deal with it.
I know we want to trust Elijah Moore again because he's had that route participation go up. We want to, like we said, and we know what he can be.
Trust him.
Yeah. But DJ Chark, he's going to be a part of this Lions offense regardless. It's just a bad matchup next week. If it was a decent matchup, if it wasn't the Jets, I think I would say DJ Chark pretty easily. If it was a neutral matchup for DJ Chark, I would say DJ Chark pretty easily.
Also, keep in mind that Elijah Moore does have a good schedule the rest of the way. Even, this week, week 16 and week 17, solid enough against the Seahawks.
I get the intrigue with Elijah Moore because everyone was on Elijah Moore coming into the season, to have that breakout. And we're seeing glimpses of at least relevance that we haven't seen all season. I would just temper expectations just a little bit, even though, like you said, he does have that good schedule. We're not sure how that's going.
And he's playing in a completely different role too, coming out the slot as well. So, something to keep in mind. Okay. Let's see. Pierre Strong mentioned him. He would be the next guy up if both Ramondre Stevenson and Damien Harris miss. Kadarius Toney, I have him here at 6. He's simply an upside bench play, a bench stash right now.
Bench play.
He's probably bench play. He's probably going to play this week because he was really close to playing in week 14. If he ends up playing, he's just an upside flex play. I would assume a floor of 0. As of right now.
Yeah, I would definitely assume a floor of 0 too, because that's kind of what we banked on a couple weeks ago when he was supposed to be playing, and then he came in and he put up a donut. So it's definitely not out of the equation. It sounds funny saying that Kadarius Toney on an offense that's quarterbacked by Patrick Mahomes might have a floor of 0, but that's entirely possible because it's happened before, and this injury, it's just been lingering the whole time. We thought it was just magical that he came to Kansas City, and that this injury would go away, but that hasn't been the case.
Yeah, sorry guys, I'm back. I got kicked out for a second. So Kadarius Toney is, for me, he just like Zach was just elaborating on. He's just an upside stash right now. If you need to play him, you need some upside next week, and your team's actually made the playoffs, but it sucks. Yeah, throw Kadarius Toney in there for some upside.
Yeah.
Because I have a sucky team in that community league. I got so many injuries, like it's over for me in that first round. So like if I have Kadarius Toney in that league, I would just play him.
Yeah.
And then I got Jahan Dotson at number 7 here. He had a pretty good game against the Giants before their bye. And, the thing that intrigues me about him is that he had 9 targets in that game. That's something to keep an eye out for because first round pick, we never see like a big spike in targets for that first round pick, especially with somebody like Curtis Samuel, who's kind of losing targets. I'm paying attention. And he has the same matchup this week.
Yeah, it is the same matchup, which is, really odd to have them go back-to-back against the same team. Just one of those weird scheduling nuances that they have in the NFL. But I'm okay with picking up Jahan Dotson. I'm not sure how much I trust him, though. He seems like he'd be a pretty good pickup, especially going against the same team. But before the last game that they played, he had 9 targets in that game. Before those 3 games before that, he had 4 targets combined. And Carson Wentz at the beginning of the season was looking for Jahan Dotson a lot. He was actually leading their rookie receivers in touchdowns by a huge margin. He had 4 touchdowns in the first 4 weeks. But then since Taylor Heineke's taken over, his target share has dropped like tremendously. And it hasn't been like anything short of just drastic that he hasn't seen the ball a whole lot. So I was kind of surprised to see him play well against the Giants, not because of the talent, but just because of the way Taylor Heineke has used him. I'm not sure I want to count on that this week, but definitely if you have no other options, he's coming off a strong performance. Maybe he can build a little bit on that rapport. And that might be what we have him here for. But I'm not a tremendous fan of Jahan Dotson unless I see another at least decent, target share in this next week. Like 5 targets, maybe I'll think about it, but he hasn't seen a whole lot before last week.
Yeah, and that's because he wasn't running routes.
Right.
Before last week. Before last week, 41% of snaps, 66% of snaps, 61% of snaps, and then in week 13 it bumped up to 80%. So it's a situation where the playing time increased, his route participation increased, and it could have been a situation where he was still a little bit banged up, and he wasn't getting that full workload. And then he ended up getting that full workload, ran 84% route participation right before his bye, and now he has another week to get back. I think he's going to become a full-time player once again this week.
All right, I hope so. I like Jahan Dotson. I liked him coming out of the draft, and I thought this was a good landing spot for him. But I think 3 weeks easing him back, I don't know. It could be, but that's not what I want to see.
Yeah, 100%. But I just don't want people to think that it's because of Taylor Heineke that he wasn't targeting him. It's just that he wasn't on the field running routes, and that's the distinction that we have to make here, right? Because otherwise, then we can easily chalk it up to that. But if he's not on the field, running routes, getting near a full route participation, we can attribute it to that more than him not having a rapport with Heineke. So when his route participation jumped all the way back up to near a full-time player, and we see the routes kind of jump back up, we're like, okay, we can kind of get back in. It's similar to the Elijah Moore situation where the routes kind of jump back up. We're like, oh, okay, he's a full-time player again. Now he's getting the targets, and there is room here. So there is room for a number 2 wide receiver to emerge, and he's obviously a talented player. So somebody to pick up, this week particularly, I would only start him as a flex play, if you need it. Next week, he has San Francisco, so very tough matchup there. But the weeks after that, not so bad against Cleveland in week 17. So, this is just purely a bet on talent. And another bet on talent at number 8 is Chigoziem Okonkwo. He was not a full-time player. He shared the routes between him and Austin Hooper this past week, the week before that. Just keep in mind, like we talked about yesterday, that Treylon Burks will likely be back this week from that concussion. So there might be some less targets to go around. But he looks talented. He's leading the league in yards per route run among all tight ends, not just rookies. So he's worth a bet on. If you need a tight end, and you're kind of streaming, you have a bunch of these low end guys. He is definitely worth a pickup. I would pick him up over almost all these guys that we have listed here at tight end.
Definitely, he's the tight end pickup for the week. And I don't want to say he's the tight end pickup of the last few weeks, but this is a really talented player. Sitting here on the waiver wire that I guarantee, most leagues, nobody's going to have had him picked up. Austin Hooper was the guy that people were rostering from the Titans. So Chigoziem Okonkwo, you could definitely pick him up. He has enough upside where, it warrants him starting, even though his floor might be, pretty low. That's the case with a lot of tight ends this season. So there's no reason not to pick him up if he's on the wire, unless you have Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, TJ Hawkinson, just grab him. You could throw him in case things look bad for another guy or just an injury would happen. Just keep him on your bench because he's healthy and he's producing.
Yeah. If Evan Ingram's available, I'll pick up Evan Ingram first. But if he's not, Okonkwo will be the next guy up. And then Parris Campbell at number 9 here. He's had a couple of down weeks, over the past few weeks. And we saw Alec Pierce kind of do his thing last week. But this week, they got the Vikings, right? So you want to target these guys, right? I think, Parris Campbell has a better matchup than Alec Pierce does this week out of the slot. Alec Pierce runs a lot of his routes on the right side. Minnesota's been okay on that right side, but on the left side, they've been, They've been absolutely. We saw, we talked about DJ Chark, and how he runs most of his routes on the left perimeter,
Yeah.
and that's where Minnesota has been super vulnerable. And where did he catch that touchdown? That long touchdown that he caught on the left perimeter. Okay, so like we kind of depend on these type of matchups, and Parris Campbell has a decent matchup out of the slot this week, so he's available in a lot of leagues. He's been dropped in a ton, especially since his bye was just this past week. You could pick him up and just start him as a PPR flex play pretty easily this week.
Yeah, and he's just been quiet. I think he's liable to, kind of get back up to where we wanted him to be in terms of his production because Matt Ryan's still playing, and this bye week should help. Maybe the teams make changes, and it could get him just a little bit more involved recently because he hasn't been getting the targets from Matt Ryan. They just have to get back to that. We talked about that before their matchup against Dallas, that they just need to get him more involved, and the offense will look better. I think they can do that. So Parris Campbell, like you said, he's a flex play definitely against Minnesota. It's like start everyone territory. He might not be a start like we had last week with the Lions, but he should have pretty decent upside, in this matchup, just based off of the matchup alone.
Chris Moore, he got it done this past week with both what's his
Jeff
name?
Driscoll,
Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins out, right? And if those guys are out again against Kansas City, I'd be happy to play Chris Moore again as a wide receiver 3. He got the targets. Didn't matter what quarterback was in there, he was being targeted. This happened before too, right? Like earlier on in the year where, like these guys were out, caught 4 balls, 43 yards and a touchdown. So he was able to get it done for you before when a lot of people were spot starting him. So in another spot start potentially this week in a good matchup against Kansas City, listen, Russell Wilson was able to throw for 3 touchdowns. Okay. The Broncos threw for 4 touchdowns in this game. Okay. Against Kansas City. Jerry Jeudy ended up getting 3 touchdowns. So it's very possible that, even on a, inferior offense, it's possible that Chris Moore can still get it done if those guys are out.
Yeah. And if this would end up being, garbage time territory, like it should have been last week against the Chiefs, which it very well could be again this week, that could just stand to help him even more. They're just going to be throwing the ball, trucking it up. Someone has to be out there catching passes. Chris Moore isn't a guy they're going to be pulling off the field, to save him for the next game. So I think this is a really nice upside play. If you have him at flex, that's really nice to have him there because I don't think you can really go wrong. If you're starting Chris Moore, yes, the floor might be pretty low, but I think you have a better shot at, cashing in on some upside this week against the Chiefs. Because like you said, the Broncos offense is bad and they kind of tore up the Chiefs defense last week.
Jameson Williams, I have him here at number 11. Like I said, he ran less than 10 routes, last week. So, he got that touchdown. Awesome. But I wouldn't start him this week against the Jets, right? Obviously.
No.
Let's see. This is a good opportunity to pick him up, put him on your bench, and then see how many routes he ends up running this week, right? And if it's like over 50% of route participation, that would be a huge jump for him. And then I would feel somewhat comfortable throwing him in my lineup in week 16 if I really, really need it, if I'm desperate and I'm looking for some upside. But other than that, like if that's not what you need, I'm okay leaving him, on the waiver wire. But I'll say this. Jameson Williams is somebody who, someone can start him in championship week, in week 17, because they're desperate. Someone got hurt. They pick up Jameson Williams. They put him in. And then he goes off, right?
Yeah.
For like 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's possible. Jameson Williams has that type of talent. So maybe you just, these type of upside guys, pick him up and put him on your bench. If you're not going to play him, don't let anyone else play him.
Right. And every week he's getting healthier. He's had the low route participation the past few weeks, but that's to be expected, coming off the type of injury that he had and missing as much time as he did. And he's competing with other guys that are good in the passing game. He's going to be working against Amon-Ra St. Brown. DJ Chark is there. And even, Josh Reynolds has been, all right. I think, like I said, I attribute that to the Rams connection with Jared Goff. But there's talent that he's working alongside. Not to mention Jamal Williams, DeAndre Swift in the backfield, and suddenly Justin Jackson again. I think regardless of how healthy he is, his route participation might not be anything near 50% the rest of the season, but it doesn't look like he's going to need that. He might be just the home run hitter, like you said. So even if he doesn't hit the 50%, maybe he gets to 40 or something like that, he'll be able to contribute, I think, down the stretch if they keep using him as a deep play threat, because that's what he was at Alabama. He looked really good, and that's what they drafted him to be, I think, at this point. So he could definitely get it done for you. If you have him as a flex, he's a really nice upside flex, assuming that his route participation goes up just a little bit, these next few weeks. I'm a little bit more confident in him. Definitely, I wouldn't drop him. If you have him, just keep him on your bench because he has the upside to be worth starting in these next 2 weeks.
I have Mecole Hardman here at 12. He could be back this week. We saw what he was doing, beforehand. Like, he wasn't getting a full route participation or anything like that, but this is the Chiefs offense. He was getting those like key red zone packages, and it's possible when he's back, they give him a little bit more of that, right? And we've seen him perform and be efficient on his touches near the red zone, especially. So he's somebody that I would pick up, throw him on my bench if I don't need to play him, even because he could be very valuable in a spot start. Now, with Kadarius Toney there, it's possible that Toney kind of, takes away some of that, right? If both these guys are healthy, do they take enough away from each other where we're not seeing, that production, that upside? But still, I think both of these guys should be rostered. Hardman will be back, and they might end up just using both these guys, and both these guys can potentially do their thing.
I think Hardman has a better floor than Kadarius Toney. That's assuming, whenever Mecole Hardman starts again, I'm not sure if it's this week or the next week, but he's getting healthier. So he's eligible to come off IR.
He's
right?
eligible to come back this week.
Yeah. So if he would play, I think his floor is better than Kadarius Toney. But I think Kadarius Toney's upside stays a little bit higher. But this is a guy that's been around in the Chiefs offense for a while, with Patrick Mahomes especially. He's been able to do his thing. They're kind of working with Juju Smith-Schuster, and that's okay. But outside of that, they're pretty thin at receiver. So I think Mecole Hardman, he comes back, he could go right back into that role that he had before. If he goes back into that role that he had before he got injured, where he finished as a wide receiver 3 and 6 back-to-back weeks, I'd have no problem starting him as a flex. But obviously, we have to see what his health looks like coming back from this injury that he had. He might be limited in the first game back, but maybe you start him in the second round of playoffs. You might be able to get him back at full strength. I'm not sure if I'd start him over a whole lot of guys, but there are definitely going to be teams out there that need somebody to start. And Mecole Hardman can be that guy.
I got Mac Hollins at 13. He's like a plug-and-play wide receiver. He's going up against New England at home this week. We've seen him kind of be up and down, but he is very capable of putting up, double-digit, PPR fantasy points any given week. So the matchup isn't terrible against the Patriots. I'm okay, starting him. Rondale Moore, I have him at 14. He didn't practice last week, but it's possible that he is back this week. So in a PPR league, I would assume that, Hollywood, Greg Dortch hardly played at all on offense this past week. Hollywood Brown was the one coming out of the slot, which is very surprising to me. And it was Robbie Anderson playing on the outside. So I would assume when Rondale Moore is back, assuming he's going to be back this week, that they would move Hollywood, back to the outside, and then Rondale Moore playing the slot. That's what I would assume. So, we'll see how that works out. But even with the quarterback change, I would still expect Rondale Moore to potentially be, PPR flex play at worst, when he's healthy.
Yeah, you never know with Cliff Kingsbury how they're going to be implementing these wide receivers and using them on the offense. But I think it would make the most sense, put Marquise Brown on the outside and Rondale Moore in the slot. I'm a little bit more turned off maybe than you are to the idea of Rondale Moore just because of that quarterback change. Colt McCoy didn't look good. And like I said, I don't know how much they're going to have to play for. They might not be playing too hard these next few games. They might just try to get through the season, reset, reload, and focus on Kyler Murray coming back for next season, that kind of thing. I don't think it's going to be the point where they don't produce, but I don't have a whole lot of hope in terms of his fantasy production for the rest of the season just because of Colt McCoy. You can pick him up. I think that he might be a volume. If he does produce, he's going to be volume-based. He's going to be a PPR guy. I don't trust him to do a whole lot of scoring on this offense just because the ceiling is now, pretty limited.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, against the Rams in Week 10, he caught 9 for 94 on 13 targets from Colt McCoy. So if a receiver is capable of doing that with Colt McCoy, I'm picking his ass.
Was Marquise Brown playing then?
He was not playing, no.
Yeah, so that kind of factors into it for me too. They finally get all their weapons back, and of course Kyler Murray goes down. But Rondale Moore, that's the thing for me. I think that he might kind of just be overshadowed by some of the targets in this offense.
My issue there, my pushback on that is that, no matter who's been starting in the slot this year, they've been getting their targets, right? And, when Zach Ertz was on the field, when DeAndre Hopkins was on the field, when so that there were different points in the season where you had Zach Ertz on the field, Hollywood Brown on the field, and then Rondale Moore on the field. All three were getting their targets. You had Ertz, you had Zach Ertz, you also had Hollywood Brown, and then you had Greg Dortch on the field, and all three were getting their targets. And in this situation, you have Hollywood Brown, you have Zach Ertz off the field now, and then you have Hopkins, and you might have Rondale Moore coming out the slot. So I think this is a situation where all of these guys, especially with their defense being as bad as they are, all these guys can get their targets. And you know what? To be honest with you, like with Kyler Murray, I would probably be more confident in Hollywood Brown than Rondale Moore. But I would not be surprised if Rondale Moore actually starts out of the slot. I would not be surprised if Rondale Moore ends up with the higher target share than Hollywood Brown, going forward, just because of the fact that he's coming out the slot, And I think because of that possibility, only in PPR leagues, because his depth of target's so low. Only because of that, and his yards after the catch ability is pretty good too. It's a situation where I don't want to leave that on the waiver wire, especially going into the playoffs, because when people can become desperate, they're going to pick up a guy like that who's capable of, getting double-digit targets. And I don't think Cliff Kingsbury is going to change the offense that much. I don't think he's going to have a choice because, this defense is bad. And, they're not going to be able to just run the ball all over teams the rest of the way.
Yeah, that's true. James Conner, you can lean on him only so much. So I guess that's true. But like I said, I'm just tempering expectations for Rondale Moore. I know it makes sense. Obviously, you should pick him up on the waiver wire, but I'm not sure, how much of an impact he's going to have.
He has good matchups. Week 16 against Tampa, week 17 against Atlanta. Out of the slot, I'm picking him up for sure. If you need another tight end, like outside the guys that I mentioned before, Conklin is available in leagues. He doesn't have a huge floor, but at least he's getting targets. So that's really what it comes down to. And then on top of that, you kind of have a decent matchup. We talked about the Jets matchups, moving forward. Detroit this week, Jacksonville, then Seattle. Three teams that are pretty vulnerable to tight ends. So at least he has good matchups the rest of the way. So if you need a tight end and you're desperate, those guys aren't available. Conklin would probably be the next guy up. Is there anybody else that you could think of available on waivers that you might want to pick up over Conklin?
In terms of tight ends?
Besides in terms of tight end, besides Okonkwo, obviously besides Evan Ingram.
I don't really think there's anybody else.
That's it,
It's
right?
hard to say because even so, with Okonkwo and them and Ingram ahead of them, I think maybe Ingram has broken out of the streamer territory. You might be able to start him every week, but Tyler Conklin and Okonkwo, I'm still considering them streamers, so they're all lumped in. You can take your pick at them. The only reason I have a little hope for Tyler Conklin is because he's had those high target games before with Mike White. So we'll see how it goes. I wouldn't really have anybody else that I can think of. Obviously, no one jumps off the page to me at tight end. No one has this whole season. So
just to kind of run through the rest of these before we sign off, Ben Skoranek, was targeted heavily by Baker Mayfield. Not somebody that I trust at all. But, if you're in a deep league, you pick him up, you throw him on your bench in PPR leagues to see if Baker Mayfield continues to target him. He was the highest targeted player, and he was the highest performer among all of these wide receivers with Baker Mayfield. And then you have Alec Pierce at 17. A little bit of a tougher matchup, but if he's moving around a little bit against Minnesota, he can get it done. This is a very, very vulnerable defense for wide receivers. So if you're desperate at wide receiver, Alec Pierce can get it done. Gus Edwards, he's getting some run. Obviously, J.K. Dobbins is in front of him, but if you need just a running back who's going to get touches, I think Gus Edwards, will be fine. As in terms of if you're desperate for a running back and you have nobody else moving forward. Isaiah McKenzie, the Bills just re-signed Cole Beasley. I don't think he's going to end up playing over Isaiah McKenzie. Maybe he will. I don't know. I doubt it. But McKenzie, he was running at a near full route participation over the past couple of weeks. Tough matchup last week, but I think moving forward, he has much better matchups. And if the Bills end up getting in more competitive games where they have to throw more, then Isaiah McKenzie could get it done. And I have Travis Homer here as a little bit of a joke. I'm just kidding. No, he's not a joke. But, listen, if you don't have a running back, right, and if you need to bet on any running back off the waiver wire to do something, Travis Homer played 90% of snaps last week on Sunday. Okay. And I understand he's going up against the 49ers, but if you're going to bet on anyone, I wouldn't just look at what he did last week in terms of his performance as like, that's just going to happen every single time he gets 90% of snaps. Okay.
Right.
So if these guys are out again, if both Kenneth Walker and EJ Dallas are out again, then, you might want to, throw him in your lineup if you're super, super desperate, as somebody who's going to be on the field on every play.
I think you'd have to be super, super desperate is right, because they are playing the Niners. And even if he does play 90% of snaps, I think he should have more points than he had last week, but I'm still tempering expectations with him just because.
I would say, like, listen, if he plays 90% of snaps again, he's getting at least 10 PPR points. Like, it just doesn't happen. Like,
how often
the correlation for
90?
Yeah, exactly. Correlation for 90% of snaps is so much higher than what he had last week. So he would be due for a lot more fantasy points, even in a tougher matchup. I would assume that he gets some more targets through the air and all that too.
Yeah, his performance was an outlier among outliers last week when you consider, like you said, how much he played.
100%. All right, guys, we got to call it now. We'll be back tomorrow for our quarterback and running back rankings. Again, hope you guys made the playoffs. And, if you have some bad beats, you had some interesting stories about how you made the playoffs or how you didn't make the playoffs, DM me over on Instagram at Upper Hand Fantasy, and I'll take a look and I'll share the most interesting ones. All right, guys, take it easy. We'll talk to you tomorrow. See ya.